Okay, hi guys, again, if you haven't been here yet, this was a project I was talking about yesterday, and we forged the flowers, and we split the hearts, and drew out the tapers and whatnot, and ran these nails around a jig for consistency. These flowers on the back I had brought pre-made. I actually pre-made these two at home just so that I was consistent with my forging, and assembled them here so I had something to leave for you guys. I just put my touch mark on it. I wanted to just talk about these petals on the back and the texturing, and I did not swing the hammer all those times to put all those marks in there. What I do is whenever I'm at an auction or a garage sale and or tailgating where there's a bucket of hammers for ridiculously cheap, I just buy old hammers and I take them home and destroy them by running my 4.5 cutoff wheel through it, my electric scalpel, and cut grooves in it, or hash marks, or you can weld up beads on them or whatever, and create yourself texturing hammers that you can then only swing at hot metal. And I'll mark on my handles so that somebody doesn't swing it at something cold and then have a piece fracture off and me feel like I was responsible for it. So after I rivet these together, and I have a rivet, this thing is supposed to go in an air hammer, and when I was doing that contest in New Mexico that I was building Clay's little treasure chest, I needed small tools, and so I thought that just worked good as a bolster for my rivets in there. Got to be careful that you're not pushing your luck on. I have driven that into Craig Trinka's anvil in his Pritchell hole, and he wasn't happy when I was trying to get it out. But I go ahead and get my stuff lined up. I try and T-square here on the back and then just go to riveting, and I rivet a lot of stuff cold. I countersunk these so I could go ahead and go back and grind the bubble because these were a little bit too long, but sometimes I don't mind leaving those on there, and when somebody affixes it to the wall, it kind of leaves it stood off of the wall a little bit, which is kind of a nice little element to it. And then if these are twisted at all, and luckily this is round, and when you twist round, you still have round, so no problems there. But I usually start in the center and then work my way out depending on how many hooks I have. But if I go ahead and clamp it in the vise, it's real easy to just use the back spine and tee myself up. So that's how I correct any issues. Ta-da! So then this will be in the auction for you guys. So the next thing was yesterday we did the Quadrafoil, or I talked about building it and my experience in learning how to build it without very much instruction at all. And do we have our handouts today?
What?
Our handouts today?
Say again?
Our handouts.
Yes.
Yes, James made a copy of Francis Whitaker's.
No, Gorder did.
Okay.
School did.
Gorder did it.
School
did it, so that you guys can take the Francis Whitaker instructions, which is also hanging on the wall with the storyboard in the Porsche room, that you can take that home with you and you can have some fun trying it as well. Afterwards, somebody made, I think it was Clay, made mention to me that instead of just making a mark at your sections where you're going to make your cusps, Francis would actually cut part way through the material, and then it would fold back really easily in that weakened spot, of course. And right away my mind thought, oh geez, and weaken the spot that I'm trying to weld, which I was struggling to get that weld anyways in the way it's oriented. But anyways, we'll pass those out at the end or put them up here or whatnot. So this is a piece that I had started at home. This was my first successful one, second successful one I made at home. And then in order to find the circumference that goes around here, you have to measure the center of the stock that you're going to use to the other side, the center of the stock. So basically, the diameter of your piece plus the width of the material you're going to use should give you the circumference to come around here. And I'm gonna try and redeem my welding, and we'll try and weld this one today. And I think a couple of things about the welding, and whenever I make a mistake, I certainly try and go back and reflect on what did I do, what were the factors involved, what could have gone wrong, and then try and solve my issues. So a couple things, maybe the fire had gotten dirty, we hadn't really cleaned it all day, and then we tried maybe with too clean of a fire, which I've never had too clean of a fire. I welded mine in propane at home, and that's what I'm normally working in, and so maybe it's just me and not being familiar with welding in, it should be easier to weld in the coal, and I know that. And then maybe another factor was I was relying on James to give me the steel when I was ready, and welding really is a timing thing. And I should probably have my eyeballs on it all the time and pulling it out when I'm accustomed to the metal looking the way it is for the hammer blows that I use. And welding is really something that you should probably dial in and be eyes on it while you're doing it. So anyways, wrapping. To wrap these and wrap anything, you got to determine how much steel you're going to need. And I use a leather boot string. I use it for measuring a lot of stuff. I've heard of people using bale wire, soldering wire, copper wire, anything like that. Any of the wires I find, even if you straighten them out, they can have some kinks and stuff in them, where this just falls pretty darn loose for me to put up to my tape and figure out what material I want. Pretty close to the size material I'm using to wrap. I certainly wouldn't want to use this to measure something that I was going to wrap with, 3/8 rod. It wouldn't come out the same. And so my wraps, I'm also trying to do my odd numbers. I have 3 wraps in the center with my Piggly Wigglies on each side. And so I fish this around. Until I have 3 wraps and enough for a little Piggly Wiggly. And then I keep in mind that I'm going to draw a little point on the end. It's not going to grow terribly, but keep in mind that's one of the things you need to consider. And so where my thumbnail is, that's what I figure I need for material. And then I go ahead and draw my points on both ends, just assembly line, and this should measure up to be the same as that. And I think you can see that's where I'm at. So if I just folded this right in half and I found the middle, then when I came to my piece, I would come here and start with the middle and wrap it around. But because I struggle by myself to hold this in place and get this started, I start that hairpin turn and then I hang it so that I don't have that complication of not having enough hands. It's holding it in place for me to some degree. And so to figure out where your bend is going to be, you have to just compensate for where your starting point will be. So, and in order to do that hairpin turn, first thing I did was just made a U shape, and then I measured the amount of stock I was wrapping, which is 3/8 square and 3/8 round, and so I used that thickness of steel, and I just had a piece of bar stock that I drove down into my round hairpin. That's not the right size. Here we go. This is. So it was round on the bottom, and then I stuck one in there and hammer, smash, whatever. So that's how I got that fancy deal. And then it's really important, I have a mark right here on the back with soapstone so that I always remember which side the long side goes on and which side the short side goes on, because I've wrapped tables and then had to cut them off because I was getting my Piggly Wigglies on the back instead of the front. So I have this one set up where I was putting the short one on the bottom, and then I always try and make sure I'm pulling the short one to the counterclockwise way and the long one to the clockwise way, or whatever. To try and, I wanted it to be consistent, but if it comes up inconsistent, you don't have to point it out. Most people won't notice. So James is going to be my fire guy, and when we start the heat, he's going to start the heat just behind whatever material I'm going to wrap, and then I use either some real small pliers or tongs or whatever, and a piece of pipe is a really easy. Sometimes I'll just have 2 pieces of pipe. You can slide it on and off your material and have a handle to grab, because eventually this is going to get hot enough. I don't want to be touching it. So eyeball it up, and we'll let James go ahead and put some fire to it. And I have to be conscientious of where I want him to put the heat, and I don't get behind it, and then he's going to watch out and make sure he don't burn me too. We'll start with this one.
Where do you want me to
I want you to start on the short one, just behind.
You want me to go up higher too? No.
So I want it to stretch and pull around the corner. Keep going. And then James is going to chase me with the heat, and it'll just soften and tighten around there. Now I've got it where I don't have to hold on to it with the other hand. And we can keep going with that one. He's got to be careful not to get it too hot, that when I pull it and stretch it, I go ahead and break it. And we've got a little bit of space. Hang on a minute, James. Hang on, James. Okay. He can't hear me with the torch going. There's a little bit of space in here, and so before we get too far, we'll get a little heat there, and I'll just give it a squeeze with the tongs here and try and tighten it up before it's too late. I get too many wraps, I won't be able to get it around the corners then. We'll just get a little heat right here so I can squeeze it tight. Okay. And now we'll come back to this little short guy just underneath. Okay? Yep. Give it a little squeeze. It got a bubble. And at any periodically check your, squeeze it this way as well. Okay, we can take this one and go back the other way now.
Long one?
The long one. Okay. Sometimes you might just want to hit it with the hammer too. There we go. Now we'll come down here. You got to be careful. If you start bending the cold steel, what you'll do is you'll, let me think about that now. If I don't have the heat in the right spot and the cold steel hits a spot, it'll create a pucker and push your material away. Get back in there. You can go right in there. Oh. There you go. Got a little too much space there. Come up in this area. Sometimes a convenience bend is needed. If this was real long, I was wrapping more, I might have to put several bends in it just to keep feeding it through the eye, like a needle. Here. Okay. Use a scrolling tongs. Let's tighten it up a little bit. When you're wrapping square and round, it'll stay tight. If you try and wrap two things that are square against each other, your wrap will tend to slide. You actually have to get your wrap to bite into the corner, otherwise you can get, it won't stay in the position you want it. Now to do the Piggly Wigglies, I over exaggerate every bend because with the next bend I open up something that I just bent. So over exaggerate, we'll do heat right there. And then I give a squeeze this way, trying to keep it tight. Okay, now we'll come just below it. Sometimes you gotta let that side cool off enough, and I'll jump back and forth from one side to the other so that one side can cool. Let's come over here, James. Okay, now we'll come back to this one. Good. Now we'll come back over here. Good. And we'll do this one. And come over here. And that one. Squish. Okay, back over here. Thank you. Oops. Okay, and we'll put our touch mark on it while we've got the torch going. You know, I hear some people say, oh, I don't have a touch mark, I'm not good enough to have a touch mark. Just go ahead and get yourself one right away. Start marking your stuff, because you'd be surprised how many people want the junk I made a long, long time ago. It's like my mother, for one, and other people, they always want the first one. And it's always the worst one, but they always want it. I don't think so. So let's find a spot that we can get it on here. I think we can go right here. Oh, hey, can you strike for me real quick? Let me get it off the anvil. No, I'm going to put the other two on. I just didn't want them in the way while I was wrapping, and then I thought maybe I should rivet them on while we were doing this. Let's see, do I have it the right way? I guess it don't matter. Yep. Okay, it's worth twice as much now. And really, in your work too, don't be afraid to mark your work. Buddy of mine gave me that one. My father made my other one. It's an anvil with J horn and a daisy on the inside of it, and pretty complicated little design. It's a company in Michigan, local, right where my folks live, and I think he paid $110 or $120 for that. And that's pretty freaking cheap that you're gonna mark how many things with it forever, right? Put that in a little bit. So then we will go ahead and, can you just quench that so I don't burn myself? Thank you, James. So these flowers were textured with a straight peen hammer instead of a texturing hammer, because the hammer face is obviously too big and I wanted to get in there with just one line at a time. There's all sorts of different rivets available. You can't believe how many different rivets are available and combinations of lengths and sizes and heads and styles and materials, and it's amazing. And Clay introduced me to JC Rivets. That is actually 2 miles from my mom and dad's house, so I have them go over all the while and buy me. You buy them by the pound, more or less. I'll say I want 100 rivets, but you know, they weigh them out, and then you pay by that weight. And these ones, I guess, are called a flathead rivet, and there's countersunk rivets, whatever. Put it through on the back. Most of the time, like on the coat hook, I'll use the domed rivet head on the front and try and preserve that that head, but you can certainly forge your own rivet head as well. If you want to make the same size rivet head on both sides, then you need 1.5 times the diameter of the rivet shank in length to create the same size dome on both sides. And that's in Francis Whitaker's cookbook as well. And then I used a ball peen hammer from over there, but this is this is called a clipping hammer farriers use. And I'm just going to back that up on the anvil. Tight. Whether you build 100 of these and turn it into a gate, or call it a trivet or a wall hanging, or turn it into a table, build larger scales, this could probably use a little bit of flattening out, but we'll leave that go for now. And then this will go in, you guys. It's not perfect, but I think it's pleasing anyways. I can look at these and say, this is too close. Maybe I would get a little torch heat here and a tweaky tool and tweaky this guy over so that I had a little bit better spacing. And I'm only pointing that out because I'm trying to teach, and I'm not selling this. You guys are, so. Okay, so how we're going to try this forge weld again. So I'm going to stay right over here with James, and we'll get that going. 3/8 inch. Are there any questions about that? I mean, it's really the big trick is to make sure your heat's in the right spot so that you're always keeping it tight to your material and more or less pulling it around your corners.
You're able to do that alone, aren't you?
Yeah, but I got to constantly put the torch down and then make sure it doesn't, swing around and bite me because the flame's still going. I need one of those fancy arms that I can just pull in and out and whatever. But that's a tool, and I don't make tools. Yet. I keep saying yet, so I should make that a higher priority, and that's something that one of the things I've learned about my farrier industry, and I'm trying to make that lateral step to blacksmithing, is that there's all different aspects of the business, and even though swinging the hammer is what I like doing the best, I have to keep in mind that there's other aspects of the business, and they need equal priority as well, whether it's marketing or bookkeeping, research, education, and I lost my point. Tools, I need to put a little bit more effort into tools and tool maintenance as well.
No, hold my tongue.
Oh, and these are not the right size tongs at all. You got some, he saved some coke over there. see, Matt? Over there? Okay, yeah, I see it now.
Got a better fire today.
Yeah.
You want to use your tongs or this one?
I'll grab it with these.
Okay.
You want me to hold it, actually? I got her. I think. Oops.
Ah.
It's all right. Not to worry. Oop, wrong hammer. Gentle, 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 gentle. It's barely stuck. Did you see it pop open? So when my hammer came down, I was thinking stick, 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 stick. So I'm not going to hit it no more. I know it's really just barely touching. Or barely stuck. And I'm going to wire brush it and then just go ahead and get another weld. Whoops. This doesn't really feel like 3/8. It feels like 5/16. So I'm going to switch tones. Yeah, that's better. My gap gauge was saying I had 3/8 tongs and this must be 5/16 stock. And looking at it, oh yeah, no, I'd rather have my other hammer. I'll just grab it on my way there. But really, you should have your anvil clean. You should have your hammer laying there ready, so all you gotta do is just pick it up and go to work, because it is all about timing and
Where's your hammer right there?
yeah, I'll just grab it on my way by. Come up here. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I feel better. I didn't want to leave here without showing I can forge weld it. And forge welding round to round is kind of a stupid thing to do because you only have just the radius edges that are touching each other, and then you got to kind of work the sides all the way around. It's probably a better idea to go ahead and prepare the ends as square, forge weld them square, and then turn it back to round. Probably somebody told me I couldn't do it, so decided I would. Thank you, James.
Thank
We
you.
did it today.
Good. Clean fire.
A little more. Got some sparkles going. Round side. So then I don't have to keep making the seam erase. Farriers do. We don't like to see a seam, and I understand blacksmiths don't mind. They don't mind showing that it was forge welded and leave that evidence there. But as I do that, I'm going to use my gap gauges, and I can still feel it's thick right there, so I would continue to forge that down until it met the same dimensions and stock as the rest of the piece. We'll go ahead and try and get a big long heat on it, and I just want to show you how, if you don't have a cone mandrel, how this is your cone mandrel.
What are the most important parts of welding?
Clean, clean, and clean. Oh, and timing. I think timing's part of it, yeah. But definitely cleanliness is next to holiness, right?
Like on the brink of burning? On the brink of burning?
On the brink of burning. The question is, what are the three most important things of welding? And I said clean, clean, and probably timing. So, but on the brink of welding, no, or burning, no, not really. I want it after I can start to see the steel start to get glassy and then start to pool and run, and then I want to pull it out. As soon as I start seeing those little firecracker sparks coming out of the fire, I kind of wait maybe 5 seconds longer. I'm counting in my head. I do a lot of counting. It's usually just small numbers, but.
How many kids?
I have 1 and 1, 2 kids. Yeah. See, and this is one of the times where I enjoy my propane forge, because I can stick something that size in my propane forge and at least get the door partway shut and have a heat on the entire thing, so that I can just roll that ring around my mandrel and hammer it. What?
Want it longer?
Oh, the longer the heat you give me, the more
Okay.
I'm going to like it. He can't hear with the fan blower going, so he's kind of in the closet over there. So what I'm going to do is essentially I'm using my horn as a bottom die, and like I was talking about yesterday, if I wrapped that and cut the wire, all of these pieces would be gradual increases in size of the same radius, and then if I start going on diagonal and the sharper or more perpendicular diagonal I go on, I have all the rest of the radiuses there. And that's probably why farriers are so efficient with the horn, is there's so many different variables or varying radiuses in a horse's foot, and we need all those. And so I'm going to build a horseshoe. Some of you asked for horseshoe, so I want to teach you a little bit about that. It's going to be like the basic kindergarten horseshoe building, but you'll have an understanding of what it is, why we do it the way we do it, and then it might be something you want to incorporate into your work, decorative, or at least when somebody comes and asks if you can build a horseshoe or know anything about it, you'll have some information that you can give them. And I like to see that the farriers and the blacksmiths can kind of come together. It seems that there's been a big sort of division or separation, that we're in two different worlds, and we're really not. We're doing the same stuff, but we just, you know, involved the live animal with it too. Okay, I'll take it now. Thank you. So this is going to be a fairly wide radius. So I'm on my straightening side. When we talked yesterday about the top of the anvil being a dividing line, I'm straightening all the way around. And if I had a whole heat, I could just keep going all the way around there. And I wish I had. Get the next section hot. So while we're kind of, I'll multitask here, and then if I get done a little bit earlier, then you guys can finish up your squares before the iron and the hat. So just basic anatomy for the farrier is the horse's leg is basically the same as our arm, and there's a inside the hoof capsule. Let's see, we'll test my drawing skills now. So we'll pretend that's the horse's hoof capsule, and inside there is a bone. Kind of like that, it's called the coffin bone. And then above that you have your short pastern bone, which is halfway inside the horse's hoof capsule and halfway outside of it. And then the next bone is the long pastern bone. And that would be coffin bone, short pastern bone, long pastern bone, and then their fetlock is the next bone up here, and then you've got some other auxiliary bones here. So the point with that is that this coffin bone is in the forward part of the horse's hoof capsule. So looking at it from the bottom, okay, here's the bottom of the horse's foot, the solar surface. You've got your hoof wall that goes all the way around. Your sole is the concave shape of the bottom of the horse's foot. The frog is a really rubbery sort of 50% moisture there, 30% moisture in the sole, 15% moisture in the hoof wall. So the hoof is really flexible, and it moves all the while. Every single time the horse steps down, the hoof expands, and they lift their foot, and it expands and contracts with each step that they bear weight. Come back to my same spot. Okay, you can see how it's truing up and getting rounder. Okay, if you look at this part here, it's getting fairly round. The rest of it's not. And I would just continue to keep going around until you iron out any of the kinks. And just using this as your bottom die. So I don't think we have to keep going.
Do what?
I don't think we have to keep going. You guys want me to finish it? No, yeah, it's good. You get the idea. So the reason when you look at a horseshoe, there's some important things about it, and one is where the nail placement is. And the sensitive structures of a horse's foot and the horny structures of a horse's foot come together with what is called lamina, or often referred to as the white line, and that's this section here. These are bars which create stability for the hoof capsule. Obviously, not being a complete circle, that's where that motion of the expansion and contraction comes. And these bars offer some stability so that the hoof capsule doesn't overexpand. So this white line is the spot where the nails are driven into the horse's foot, and then they come out and exit when we're looking at the horse's foot from the front. And when you drive that nail in from the bottom, the nails are designed that they will come out 1/3 the way up the hoof wall from the ground surface. And it's important that the nails go in that spot. Otherwise, if you drive them into the hoof wall just splits like a chunk of wood could, or if you drive it into the sensitive structures, you're going to create a lot of issues, potentially abscessing and bleeding and lameness and whatnot. So the placement of the nail is really, really important. And then we determine the size of material. Like, this is just an average saddle horse size shoe, and the horse's hoof wall is going to be on this section here, and then I'm going to hit the white line here where my nails are. So really important where the nails are. And then the widest point of the horse's foot, where this arch and this radius are, is right in about this region of the horse's foot, and that's where that coffin bone is setting within the hoof capsule as well. So bone here, and it has sort of a body shape to it. And then from here back on the horse's hoof capsule is lateral cartilage, which is, you know, like your nose, you can move it. And so it's important that the nails are from this widest part of the foot forward, so that you're not inhibiting in that expansion and contraction of the horse's foot. And then typically, with a set of dividers, I'll usually do it, is measure from the center of the horse's frog, the central sulcus, and I'll measure to this point of heel. And it's usually the same, or ideally it's the same if the horse is good, solid, correct foot. And then from our horseshoe, we can mark a dot on the front of our horseshoe and swing that same radius, and that's where our first toenail is going to be on both sides. And then whether you're using 6 nails or 8 nails, whatever, you split those differences. So that's the really important thing, where those nails are. And when I see blacksmiths make horseshoes, you know, they'll be all over the place, and no consideration to how the shoe is used. So one thing that's really important whenever you're building anything, whether it be a lamp or a table, is that you understand how it's going to be used. And so for a coffee table, I need to know who I'm building it for, so that I can build it according to the couch it's going to sit in front of. If I'm shopping for a lampshade, there are ratios that, you know, I looked on interior design websites to find out what is the ratio diameter of the shade and height of the shade to match up properly with the height of my table or my lamp. So understanding the use is really important in being able to be successful at building it, regardless. Just like the tools. If I built those tongs, I could tell you better why they hollow out the inside of that tong head. So first thing, this is considered a plain stamp shoe, and there are, I can't even tell you how many variations of shoes and combinations of accessories that you can put onto a shoe. Where Tom was practicing building some caulks, which is an accessory. We have trailers and rolled toes and, you know, different things to assist the horse. There's 3 reasons we shoe horses. 1, to protect their foot when wear exceeds growth. 2, to enhance a job description. Or 3 is to achieve balance when balance can't be achieved on its own. So a hoof capsule grows continually, just like our fingernails do, and it needs constant maintenance. Anywhere between 5 and 8 or 10 weeks, depending on your season, age of horse, diet, exercise. All these factors will contribute to how fast a horse's foot grows. And we go regularly around to the same stops over again. We develop a clientele that we service. So this is just a regular old plain stamp shoe. Probably one of the hardest shoes to build, because there's no place to hide your mistakes at. It's any mistakes are going to be really obvious. And then this is considered a 3/4 fullard shoe, and it just goes on and on and on. I can't even tell you how many shoes there are. I'm going to build the 3/4 fullard shoe just because it has more forging exercises in it that I can explain as I go. And the first thing we'll do is start with, do you have the steel or do I have it? I got both. We'll just start with, I have 11 and a half, I'll use 11-inch shoe, and I'm going to find the center. We can go into offsets because feet have a longer lateral branch on the inside, but that's not kindergarten. We just stick with the basics here so that you guys have an understanding and just can see some forging exercise or technique, I guess. So I was just going to do one so that I can not drag it out and bore them. So 5.5 is the center. Oops. Center dot, and I put it on the leading edge of the shoe. And so when I come out of the fire with my tongs, I'll know that that's going to be the toe of the shoe, and I'm going to make my toe bend in this way. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to estimate about 1.5 inches from my center mark on both sides, and maybe I'll go 1.25 inches on both sides. This is just experience from the size of steel and shoes that I build, and take just one short heat there in the center. Guess I should chalk that for about 1.5 inches there, 1/4 inch and 1/4. Eyeball that in there, and then I'm just going to take one heat there, and I'm going to make an upset into it. When I upset it, this anvil is too tall for me as well, but I'm going to have that leading edge to me because I want the material to swell towards me, just for wearability in the horse's shoe. And plus, when I make a toe bend, I know that this inside of the steel is going to pucker. And so if I create mass on the other side, I don't have the inside thicker, I want the outside thicker. We're just going to take a toe heat right there. For me, I have 4 different anvils in my shop set up that I use, 4 different things, but when I'm forging horseshoes, I want my anvil at a height that when I swing my arm, I can use the entire rotation of my arm and shoulder and my hammer till it comes down and hits. Basically, the steel I'm using to build horseshoes all the time is relatively 3/8, 5/16, 1/2 inch for the most part. So I want my full rotation, all of the potential I have out of my arm to come on top of my 3/8 before I hit the anvil. And so here, and then 3/8 of the material on top of it, I can't get all of the rotation out of my arm. So it's limiting me in that way. And that's why farriers keep their anvils at a lower height. For me to upset this, I'm going to have to really stand up, and I don't have very much ability to swing high. There are other ways you can upset, finding a foot, using swedge blocks, steel on the floor, whatever works. So I'm just going to do it on the face, or I can come to the step even. That's a good question. Do you make standard sizes or fit for a specific horse? Yes. If I'm just making shoes at home that I want to throw in the truck, I just make standard sizes. If I'm at the horse, I measure the horse's foot and I cut the steel exactly for that. I don't want to make a shoe and then have to go through the exercise of cutting both heels off because it's too long. And trying to stretch a shoe takes a lot of effort as well. So for farriers, we want to understand the way the steel moves. We don't want to have to cut and rasp at the end. And that's why I was so hung up on being able to measure that circle and make it fit around my quatrefoil without having to turn a circle and then nip some off. That's the wrong kind of thinking for a farrier. I want it to come out just the way I intended it to. Yeah. Thank you. So I've got longer heat than I want. I only want to upset the area that's going to be between those toenails. So water is your friend. And when I'm upsetting, I'm not looking at the center of the steel there. I'm looking at the bottom. I'm actually looking at the anvil, pretending if the steel wasn't there, I would hit the anvil. Some people will hover their steel. I'm not very good at it, but they'll hover it in the idea that they're bumping both ends at the same time, but I was never good at that. Once it starts to do that spaghetti bend, you got to straighten it out. You're not upsetting anymore, you're just bending. too hot of a heat, all you'll get is bending right away. You won't get upsetting. I'm sorry? If the heat is too hot, it's just going to bend. It will upset at a cooler temperature better. It'll stay straight and just keep packing in. Thank you, James. So I'm using the edge of the anvil and standing my ruler against it so I can measure and see how much material did I pack into that shoe. And I put about 1/4 of an inch into it. So now I'm going to take the same exact heat. I don't mind if it's longer, and I'm going to go into the toe bend. Same heat right in the center.
Thank you.
So when I come out this time, I'm going to pay attention to where my tongs are on the end of my horseshoe, and I'm going to use the same amount of distance to rest against the anvil, and I'm going to start low, and I'm going to start hammering at the heat just outside of that 1.5 inches, that 3 inches in the center where I'm working, and with the round side of my hammer, I'm going to let it drop, and my smart arm is going to turn the metal. And Bob Marshall, a 5-time world champion, one of my big mentors in the farrier industry, he told me a rhyme one time. He said, don't hold it and knock it. He said, turn it and block it. And that makes a lot of sense. I think about that all the time, that this is the arm that's turning the steel, and this is just pinning it in a place to turn. This is a turning fork to me. So horses' front feet are real round. It's the steering, and they need to be able to turn in all directions, and their feet are rather round. Hind feet are more spade-shaped. Are you ready? Okay, I can do that. Trying to find that little round dot. Normally when I put it in the fire, I know which direction it is so that when I come out, I don't have to look for it. I know where it's at. But anyways. So what's happened is the outside has stretched and the inside has puckered, so I need to flatten that back out. And then I find my dot, I can see it there. If I put it on the top of my die, right there, and I'm just going to drop this down till this is sticking out, and hit here, turn it around the other way, do the exact same move. I should get the same toe. I've got it off, and part of that is because the heat was not quite in the center, and I said go for it anyways. So this side has got more steel in it than that side. If I open this side up this way, and then drive some of this down, I should have more heat. So then if I had those calipers set up for 1.5 inches right now, which I don't, I would go ahead and scribe and mark those first nail holes. So this is what we call a hockey stick state. And the next thing I'm going to do is put the heels on it. We'll just get this branch hot this way. Thank you. I want the horseshoe to come around. I want the shoe to come around and sit on the horse's foot like this, and then I want it to have a nice check here, we'll call it, so that the commissures that go on both sides of the horse's frog have a clean out, and this angle should match that horse's frog. Since we don't have a foot that we're actually fitting, we'll just put a generic, first thing I do is just try and make the end of the shoe look like the end of my thumb, and then I'll hammer a little bit of a flat spot in it, and that becomes that check that falls alongside the commissure of the horse's foot. So that as they're moving and walking around, the dirt has a way to self-clean out, and it doesn't trap dirt and manure and whatnot into their foot. I'm sorry? Yeah, we're good. Thanks. So in order to do that, I'm going to pull the steel out. My tongs are going to be in line with that branch, come to the edge of my anvil here, and I'm going to have blows that are, if I missed everything, I would actually hit myself in the knee is where I'm aiming, and peel this corner back up this way and peel it up this way. If I try and go this way down, you'll end up with fish lips. So I want it to swell this, that's a little over exaggerated, but I want it to swell that way. If I try and move the material like a taper, I'll end up with a fish lip on it, and we don't want that. And it's not, I'm not drawing it to a point like a normal, like normally drawn taper. Thank you. And then as it swells and gets thick, flatten it out. I still ended up with a tiny little bit. And then you would go to the horn, and I jam my toe bend that I had created into the horn where it's tight, and then I'm going to start bending the material on the opposite side there. So we'll take another heat there on that branch. And just like when I was folding in half for the quadrafoil, the inertia will kick out that end. So I'll start here and dropping my left hand just to sort of start that arc, and then I'll go to the horn and use the horn as my bottom die. Yes?
So looking at the hoof from the bottom, is it like a fingernail, and the cuticle is the part that's the clean out?
The cuticle is the connection between the sensitive and insensitive structures, so that would be more like the white line. And the clean out would be like probably that spot where junk gets underneath your fingernail.
Okay.
Ready? Thank you. And it's easy to get going too fast. Sometimes you gotta let the steel move. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. I could do it with the wire brush if I want. You're using leverage against the horn and all that. It's not real hard. So I started off this way because the front part of the horse's foot's got a lot of radius to it. And as you come back to the back part of the foot, it's a straighter, flatter radius. And that's why I'm rotating like that to get that other angle, that different radius. So in order to put the crease into the horseshoe, when I drive a fuller, this is a farrier's fuller, so it's got a curved edge to it, much like a butcher, should be sharp. And when I drive that into that 3/4 inch steel, it's obviously going to blow it out. All that steel where that crease is goes somewhere. And I don't want it to blow out to the side and have irregular thickness. I want it to be 3/4 consistently all the way through the shoe. So I'm going to prepare it for what's going to happen. I'm going to prepare the steel by hemming it so that when I drive that fuller in there and blow it out, I come back to my 3/4. So the stock is like this. I'm going to come in, and with my hammer blows being on an angle or a diagonal, I want to create this shape to the steel. And this would be, I did that the wrong way. I want to do this way. Okay, so this is the bearing surface of the horse's foot, is going to be, it's upside down. And this is the ground surface, and I'm going to drive my fuller in up here on the top. And if I hem this material and I take what used to be out here and I push it up here, then when I drive my fuller in, this will come back out to square, and that extra length, that extra steel that used to be in the fuller actually becomes length. The branch will get longer. Does that make sense? Same heat. I am not the world's greatest horseshoe maker or farrier unless you're in my pond, and then I am. But if you go out in the big world, in the big ocean, there are way better farriers and way better horseshoe builders. But we continue our education through farrier competitions. And when you go to a competition, they'll take your shoe and they will tear it apart. Every little element of it is analyzed, whether your fullering was 2/3 the depth, where your nail placement was, what the finish, the corners, the heels, the clip, all the accessories, and it's very, very competitive. And if you were at Urbana and you saw Craig Trinka and his World Championship blacksmith semi-trailer there, they draw competitors from all around the country. And step up to one of those fires and you can get humbled pretty quick. And it's pretty neat that everybody is competing with each other, and they're encouraging and teaching each other and helping each other, but everybody still wants to win themselves too.
How many horses you take care of? They give you like
How many horses do I take care of? My business up north is really seasonal, so it's a lot in the summertime and less in the wintertime. A lot of my horses migrate out of the area, but I'm probably carrying about 150 horses in my book. My magic number is 4. If I can do the equivalent to 4 sets of horseshoes in a day, it's a fair amount of work, and a little bit more. I consider 4 trims equal to 1 shoeing job. I used to do way more work, pigs, goats, cows, it didn't matter what it was. I had 2 kids I was trying to feed and keep in shoes, but now that they do that themselves, I don't work nearly as hard. And you just can't. You get older and it's harder and harder to get down there. So I'm just guessing. I should have marked these, but I'm just guessing for. So my hammer blows are at an angle, and you can see that the bottom of the shoe is still 3/4 inch wide, but the top of the shoe is less than that. And I'm just running one more little time, and I haven't hit the edge where the foot's going to set. I should have marked them. I'm just eyeballing it. I would have marked where my fullering was going to start, which is determined by, you maybe weren't here, but determining by the heels of the foot, I would have gone and marked the toes, the toenails. So resting my fuller against my hammer, I'm trying to find the center, but not the center of the top that I just hemmed, the center of the bottom. So really what I'm looking at is the distance between the inside of my fuller and the inside of the shoe, and half of 3/4 is 3/8, so I'm trying to look for that to be a 3/8 distance. And all I'm going to do right now is just mark it. Chitter-chattering, it's getting too cold for me to do anything else anyways. And I've used tools, calipers, crescent wrenches, different things to try and train my eye, and then eventually get rid of the cheater tools and just trust your eyeball. Probably should have gone up a little bit farther. So now I'll get the next heat. And normally when I do this, I can build this shoe in 5 heats easily, 3 heats if I really want to, push it. And I'm doing it in 22 heats just so I can talk while I'm doing it. We'll take the same heat again. And now this time I'm just going to follow my line and really sink my fuller down in there. My goal is to get where my crease is 2/3 the depth of the thickness of the shoe. And the steel varies. This is just a saddle horse size shoe. If I was building draft horse shoe, I'd use much bigger stock, of course. Yes?
Maybe you said, but how do you determine your starting length?
My starting length? The question is, how do I determine the starting length? And it's from, if this was an actual horse, I would have taken a flexible tape and I would have measured from the one point of the heel all the way around to the other point of the heel, and then I would have measured that. And because I know my hammer swing and my forging, I know how much that's going to change by driving a fuller into it, and I would subtract probably 1 3/8 inches from this length to get a shoe that would fit that foot. If it was a plain stamp shoe, I wouldn't subtract so much because I'm not going to get any stretch out of it when I fuller it. And the same thing, just like doing the flowers, and that's why I try and teach these flowers and the fun forging to the farriers who don't build shoes or struggle with it, because it's just a really easy way to practice the same things that we do to horseshoes. And so I'm going to stand it up there and then walk my fuller along, and I'm only using just that leading corner, and the rest just sort of drags through as if you were cutting. Whoop, 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 whoop.
Oh, yeah.
Blow on it, blow on it. They say the mice eat the steel in the forge. So you see I lifted my punch up. I really want to set that corner, and then I'll drop it down and inch it along. If it's too narrow, I can always lean this out and get a little bit more width out of my fullering. When you drive a punch or a fuller into something, it's like pushing a fence post with a bucket. Everything gets sucked down in there. So I want to flatten it back out, knock all the slag I can off of it, clean my anvil so I don't drive all that crud back into the shoe. And then with the flat side, I'm just doing overlapping, planishing blows. And you can see the left hand's doing all the work, and the right hand's just a dummy. It just keeps coming down. And I'm trying to keep my work right here in the solid part of the anvil all the time. I want to bottom that out, just like shearing any other hole. Oops. And then the same as Seth and his eyes, just shear the material out of there. Oop, I didn't get that one clear to the bottom because it should come out easier than that. Okay, so the reason there's no handle on this tool is because this is the tool that is going to determine the pitch that the nail goes into the horse's foot. So I want to be able to angle that so that I can change. Do you still have a horseshoe nail in your pocket? No? Okay.
On that shoe over there, I had pulled it force. So I changed.
I don't know what happened to him.
Nails, it goes center. I tilted it out.
I don't know what happened to him.
Oh, I'm,
That horseshoe? There's a cup over there with some.
I'll just show you. So there's lots of different styles of horseshoe nails as well, and the head of them is a different shape, and this would be considered an E-head shape. It's more or less parallel or pyramid shaped on both sides, pretty equal. Are there city heads in here? They're all the same. Okay, there's different styles of nails anyways, but this one, and they're different lengths, and so when you stick it in the heel, this is an old shoe, when you stick it in the heel nail, it should be fairly straight up and down, and then as you go to the toenail, it should have more pitch to it. That one doesn't have very good pitch. And that doesn't fit in that hole. But the idea is that when you drive a nail into a horse's foot, you drive it in at the angle of the wall, and then there's a little bevel on the end of the nail that encourages the nail to pop out the edge. And the faster you hit it, the sooner it'll pop out the edge. But so when you're punching the nail holes, you want to follow that pitch of wherever it is in the horse's foot, and it's usually more of an angle closer to the toe, and as it comes around to the heels, it straightens up. So the reason this is not on a stick is so that I can determine that pitch. So now I'm not going to be able to pritchel it now. Back out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to do the other side without talking and hopefully not burning it up and not screwing it up, and just show you. And it's not a very good horseshoe, but you're getting the idea of what we do and why we do it that way. And then you should also know, yes?
Don't some farriers just buy a bunch of shoes that are close and then like adjust them?
Yeah, the question is, don't some farriers just buy pre-manufactured shoes? And yes, I do as well. You can't build every shoe you put on a horse, but people do, but I don't know why they're being that hard on themselves. The horseshoe manufacturing has grown to huge varieties of shoes and huge varieties of options that you can buy a lot of things that you need. You can minimize the amount of forging that you have to do. Every shoe should be somewhat custom fit to the horse's foot, and there's real elaborate shoes that cost more than a more basic shoe. I buy basic shoes and then I enhance them myself. If I want to put a accessory onto the shoe, then I just go ahead and forge it into the shoe myself. But yes, you can buy pre-manufactured shoes, and some people don't do anything to them, but there's more potential in them a lot of times, depending on the shoes you're buying. And you know, I don't build nearly as many shoes as I used to when I competed. I build other stuff, so I'm pretty rusty on my horseshoe building skills right now. Okay, one heat, make a heel, turn a branch, mark it, forward it, and the second heat. So, you guys know why you hang a horseshoe over your door, right? People like to catch luck in their horseshoes, but one day, back when all blacksmiths also pulled teeth and married people and built shod horses and did everything else under the sun, the blacksmith was busy shoeing a horse. Beautiful white majestic horse is standing there in the shop. Bellows are going, hammer is going, anvil's ringing, and it attracted the devil. And the devil came and peeked his nose in the shop and saw what was going on. These beautiful horseshoes being nailed to this beautiful animal. Leave you in suspense for a minute. Yep, a little sticky. That spot's a little colder than I want it to be. That ring and anvil, I want to talk about that before I'm done too. My tools are not tuned up. And I'm not getting that slug knocked out of there. Just like Seth was talking about the ends of the tools matching, the ends of my tools should match as well so that I'm hitting the entire, when I drive the material down to the anvil with this tool and make that little slug at the bottom, the pritchel should come in behind it and only just touch that same rectangular shape and then have relief, just like a drill bit would, have relief for the sides to go through, and I'm not tooled up for it. And then whatever angle, it doesn't matter if it's a pritchel or whatever you're using, whatever you angle you drive something in, make sure you come out the same way. Otherwise you take the risk of fracturing off the end of your tools. So we'll just take an overall heat on the whole shoe if you can. So where was I?
White horse, the devil just showed up.
See-
Beautiful animal, beautiful.
And so he sees this beautiful horse getting shod, right? And out he goes, just a prancing away, as pretty as can be. And the devil said, I got to get me some of those shoes. That's pretty fancy. Get some. So he goes in and he tells the blacksmith, fix me up, shoe my hooves like you did that white horse. I want some of those shoes. And the blacksmith knew he was dancing with the devil. So he went ahead and he built some shoes and he burned them right hot to a horse's foot, which we do burn shoes on horses' feet, but he really burned them on there, and he drove the nails, hitting the quick as he drove them on, and the devil paid the blacksmith, And out the shop he went. The devil threw the money into the forge, wanting nothing to do with the prince of death. And as the devil went down the road, he got sorer and sorer and lamer, and he finally kicked off those shoes, and he swore we would never ever go back to that place where those wretched shoes came from. So the blacksmith hung the shoe on the outside of the door to warn off the devil, don't come around here, that's where the shoes are at. So. Oh, you know the story probably better than me then. Saint who?
How many different sizes of horseshoes are there?
What do I have to do?
Dunstan is not on there.
Oh, okay. There you go. He's got it worn pretty well. He's been carrying that in his pocket. So the devil doesn't come near you either, right?
Saint of blacksmith and farriers.
Say that again out loud. Louder.
Dunstan.
Dunstan.
Saint Dunstan.
And what about blacksmith and farriers?
He's the patron saint.
He's the patron saint of blacksmith and farriers.
Said it quietly.
I know.
She said say it louder, he said it quieter.
That's good. Yeah, you're good. So farrier work is much like blacksmith work. It's a continually fixing all the things you messed up. So just try and put a little shape into it. Oops, wrong one. Yeah, my shoe's really racked. You think yours was racked? Mine is really racked. And because I didn't have any marks, I was just sort of estimating. And you can see when I'm finished with my shoe, this has got a bad shape in the toe too. And my eye is we chewed up some of the material here with too much heat. And so it looks really wimpy right here. And then my fullering is too far back here. Ideally, when I'm done with my shoe, I want my toenails here to go all the way across. And if I had created, there's so many different ways to build horseshoes, but if I had created the whole horseshoe shape first, I could have laid it out and then gone ahead and punched my nails there, found the widest part of my foot, and done that as well, and then split the difference. And the next time I agree to do it in front of a crowd, I'll practice this as well, right with the quadrifoils. But anyways, that gives you an idea about how horseshoes are built and what the purpose and intentions of them are. So if there's any questions, we can take those.
Have you ever shot any oxen or?
I have not done any oxen, and it's really interesting to me how you nail only on one side of their toe, and it doesn't leverage or whatever, doesn't make that thing fall off. I don't know how that works.
Well, my understanding is they're separate toes.
Yes.
Shoe on each half, right?
Yes, the oxen has separate independent toes, and each half of the toe is shod, and so where the hoof is one continuous, the oxen is more like this, and so their white line is on this outside. I don't know what's on the inside, but their nails go on this side, and it's only nailed on one side. I've never seen an oxen shod, but I would certainly be interested in it. I can't answer anything else other than that. No, it's two independent, like half moon type looking, and it's not. Oxen shoe looks. I think they have actually like a little clip that goes up between. Does somebody know this? What's that? You like pork chops?
I said, it looks about like.
It looks like a pork chop. So, is this a pork chop shape? I mean, it's a wider and flatter material than a horseshoe is, and then they can run a fuller line and have horseshoe oxen nails, I guess you'd call them over there. And then I think there's a clip that might come up between the toes. That maybe that's what helps it stay on. Somebody more. Real narrow here. And then they get wider. They have more pad on the bottom of their foot and less hoof wall than a horse does. And the horse has more wall and less pad.
What kind of steel is horseshoes made out of?
Just mild steel. They also, I'm sorry?
836?
Yes. And then they also make shoes out of aluminum. There's some crazies that have tried the titanium thing, but that's ridiculous. It takes a lot of whacking. They thought it would increase wearability and be lightweight for the animal, and it's just not worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to get there. So they're not real successful. The aluminum shoes wear out fast, and I don't understand about aluminum so much, but you can forge an aluminum shoe and then you've softened it with all the heating and annealing and whatnot. But it's my understanding that if you leave them set on the shelf, I don't know for how long, that over time they get some resistance back to them.
Yeah.
But is that, I don't know about age hardening. Yeah, I'm not really educated in that way. And aluminum shoes are really popular, but they're more expensive and they wear out faster. But like I said, some horse people can be crazy, and they just throw all of their money at their horse.
So
Go ahead.
does a horse normally wear out his shoes?
Yes. So if I hand make my shoes, and they will last longer than a pre-manufactured shoe will, but there's a lot of factors involved in that as well. How often is the person riding? How often is the horse, engaging in activities? What is the ground that they're working on? How abrasive is it? Things like that.
In theory, or optimally, the horse's feet would not need attention until the shoe is worn out.
It's a maintenance schedule. The job of the farrier is to maintain the horse's hoof capsule and balance. The horse's feet are the foundation to the animal. So if they start growing, and their feet will grow forward and down as they go, you start to throw off all of the biomechanics and the alignment of the joints and whatnot in the rest of the leg, and of course it affects the rest of the body. If you have shoes that are worn irregularly, now your hips are hurting, your back, your neck is, whatever. So no different in the horse either. So depending on what they're doing and how often they're doing it and where they're doing it, the age of the horse, younger horse, older horses won't grow as fast. In the wintertime, my horses up north, their feet just lock up. There's enough moisture in the horse's feet that they freeze and they just don't grow at the same rate as they do. Plus, they're on a dry diet, so their nutrition isn't quite as good as when it's in the summertime and they're on grass. And then in the summer, they stand around stomping flies. There's no muscles in the horse's leg below the knee or the hock, so the only way blood is circulated in and out of their foot is by that hydraulic system, if you will, of them stepping on and lifting and stepping on their feet, pumping the blood in and out of their foot. So the more activity they have, I have polo horses that they're exercised and jogged every single day on a regime. They only go and play for 4 minutes at a time, but they've got to have all this endurance and wind built up in them. And so they're exercised regularly all the time, and they grow an enormous amount of foot in only 4 weeks, where I could have an old horse down the road that's out in some cattle pasture that I might not have to do him maybe every 8 or 9 weeks or something. So there's a lot of variables that influence how often and what needs to be done. But the farrier's job is maintenance. Keep it as close to balanced as possible. And when I say balanced, when I talked about the bar or the bridge of the horse's foot, or the center, the widest point of the horse's foot, if you look at it from the side, it correlates with where the articulation in the joint is. And so I certainly don't want his joints to get where there's a pastern bone or any alignment where one side of the joint is smaller than the other side of the joint. I want to maintain equal, and they'll have full rotation in their capsule, right? And not creating arthritis from uneven pressure in anywhere. And as their foot grows, that's going to change all the biomechanics and the ligaments and tendons and the bony alignment. So my job is to maintain it and keep it as close to balance
So
as
if a horse
possible.
isn't walking around as much or is on soft ground or something, you might need to remove a shoe and trim the hoof and reshoe.
It doesn't matter what the horse is doing, my job is to maintain it. And if he's wearing a shoe, I take the shoe off, I trim the hoof capsule, bring it back into balance, reapply the shoe. And so I can reapply a handmade shoe maybe several times. Often I can reapply a keg shoe at least once. Sometimes I've got somebody, teenage kids who are out riding trails all the time. You can't keep them off their horses. You may never be able to reset a shoe on them, especially if they're riding in a really rocky, abrasive area and they're wearing them out.
And do many of your horses go barefoot?
Yes, barefoot is best. And just like the rest of life, we're constantly trying to make the best decision, and barefoot is best. But if they're wearing their feet down to the point that they're tender, well, we got to do something about it. So the nails in the foot and the shoe on their foot is the lesser of the two evils. And if the horse has some sort of conformational issue or lameness issue that they can't stand, if they're standing like this all the time, eventually they're going to blow out lateral ligaments, collateral ligaments around their joints, or maybe boa tendon or a suspensory ligament or something else. So it's always the making the choice of the lesser of evils. But barefoot is best. It's just not always possible. I can't walk around barefoot, so I agree with shoes, and it's my job. And I love it, and it's a combination of the blacksmithing and the horses that I love. I'm just a horse crazy kid. So, are there any other questions? Have I ever split a hoof? No, I don't know that I've ever split a hoof.
Or like
If I told you I never did, I'd be lying. I mean, I've shod thousands of horses, and I've learned my lessons sometimes the hard way as well. So, yeah. It's less now. The better and more skilled and smarter I get, it's less now. I can't tell you when the last time was, so touch some wood. Oh, about this anvil. Ringy, 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 ringy. And it goes right back to the lesser of evils, too. The stand is blocked to the floor, but the casing is, but nothing inside is. So you get a lot of movement out of this, and just like Seth's rasping, it's the vibrations that are making the noise. And I would prefer, and I understand this is set up so that students can raise and lower the anvils and and that sort of thing. But for myself and for you guys, hopefully, you would take your anvil and you would lock it as solidly as possible to what you're locking it to, and locking it to the floor so it doesn't dance around is fine too. The photograph in my slideshow showed my anvil on a wooden stump, but what it is strips of plywood that I cut in, I don't know, 3.5-inch strips or whatnot, and I built myself a pyramid, and almost to the top, I laid some 1/2 by 1.5 bars in there tapped, and then I continued my wood pyramid on there. I filled the inside of the wood stump pyramid with silicon sand, and then I bolted my anvil to those bars that are buried down inside there. It's as important that the base or whatever your anvil is on is just as heavy and solid as your anvil is. And every time, you know, I watch somebody striking and I see this thing bouncing, I think they got to swing 2 extra times just because of all that bounce. So take that into consideration. And then if you've got it all locked down on everything's heavy and solid and not moving and it's still got some ring, throw some magnets on the side of it. Try and deaden. I hear people say, oh, if it doesn't ring, it's not a good anvil. That's not true. If it rings, you're going to go deaf, and you're still going to go deaf even if it's a dead sound, but try and get a dead sound out of your anvil so your ears don't suffer for it, right? Yeah, thank you.
What do you have to do to become a certified journeyman horseshoer?
What do you have to do to become a certified journeyman horseshoer? The American Farriers Association is our national farriers association, and they have a volunteer testing program. And you can start off as a intern. I don't think anyone ever does that. The next level above that would be certified. Tom is a certified farrier. The next level above that is certified tradesman, and then above that is the certified journeyman. In each level of the test, of the certification, there's 3 different portions of a test that you voluntarily put yourself up against. One is a written test about all aspects of horseshoeing anatomy, diseases of the hoof and whatnot. One is a shoe display. At the 3 different levels, there's different things that you do, but you show up to the test with specific shoes you were told to build at home, with all of the jewelry, if you will, or modifications on it there's a list of 13 different things you have to present: trailers, extended heels, rocker toes, nail holes, bar shoe, way to raise an angle, punch nail holes, different things. And then another level, you have to present a foldered shoe like this. And then there's the 3rd section, you have to actually shoe a horse on site to, just like the contest. They take it apart and they score, okay, what's the hoof wall look like? What's the frog look like? What's the sole look like? Hoof wall dressing and edges. They take, I think there's like 10 different subcategories that you're scored on in each portion of that exam, and at the end, you've built the horseshoes and shod the horse. For certified level, you get to use pre-manufactured shoes, and you shoe 2 feet in a 1-hour time limit. And for a journeyman exam, you shoe all 4 feet, prepare the feet, build the shoes, nail it on, finish it. 4 feet, plain stamped shoes in a 2-hour time limit. And it's the fastest 2 hours of your life. It's like that 20 minutes the other night. It's just like, where did the time go? And the United States has not gotten a hold of our industry and regulated it in any way. In England and maybe in other parts of the country, in England, you have to be a licensed farrier. You have to attend a accredited college and earn a degree and serve a certain amount of time as an apprentice. And if you're caught shoeing horses without following the right criteria through their system, you will go to jail for it. But we haven't done that in our country, and it's a huge debate in our industry whether it should be licensed or not, and it's split. And I see the pros and cons of both sides of it, and I hope that I've retired from shoeing horses by the time it gets to be something I'm not comfortable with, because right now I'm comfortable. I'm managing my own life and managing my own business, and OSHA doesn't come and check me out, and I don't have to pay any extra state licensing fees, and somebody who has absolutely no idea, and this is just this much information about my industry and horses and horseshoeing, and I certainly don't want some politician or somebody else dictating what they completely wouldn't understand. So
Put your touch mark on that shoe.
I'll put my touch mark on a better shoe than that. That one can go in the junk. That one is not suitable, but I'll touch mark this one and give it to you guys. So we'll just heat up this lateral heel so I can put my touch mark on it. And that one's not even a great shoe, but it's at least respectable.
Do you touch marks for the shoes that go on horses?
Depends on how good they are. If it's a horse that I know is leaving the area, a lot of times we'll put our touch marks on them. It's kind of like letting that balloon go or throwing that bottle into the sea just to see who in the heck catches it on the other end. Yeah.
Oh,
Any other questions?
Have you ever had a new horse come in that's got a touch mark from another?
Oh yeah, yeah. Sometimes you'll pull off a shoe, it's got a leather pad or something on it, you know, and there'll be a note or something written in black Sharpie on the underside of the pad. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Farrier games.
You ever been kicked or bit?
I've been kicked, I've been bit, I've been stomped, I've been thrown. I had a horse fall on me. I broke my pelvis in 5 spots and my shoulder twice.
Were you shooting when you had that happen, or were you riding?
I was on that one's back for just a brief moment. Yeah, you know, it's, as my skills have gotten better, my clientele has gotten better, the horses are better, and I'm not in nearly as risky of a position, and I don't need that holy dollar as nearly as bad as I did when I was feeding children. So I walk away from horses that are dangerous, but every once in a while you get caught off guard, and a horse that you've been working on was completely good the entire time. Nice brand new horse just moved into the barn, and then you go to drive a nail and bam, the thing explodes and you're just not ready for it. It happens too. Okay, any other questions? Okay, you guys got a few minutes to finish up your squares and get them turned in, and thank you very much.